Hey, good morning. I am currently doing a live stream so that I can read poetry with you. And if you'd like, I'll be happy to discuss it as well. So, as I'm going along with this, I'm going to be attempting to multitask and do both things. Right now, I have set up a Patreon account and I'm doing some uh, Patreon perks back and forth as I go through. So, I'm looking at. Not only Patreon, but also YouTube right now. So you'll have to bear with me as I figure the best way how to do this out. But today I am going to read with you um, In Memoriam by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And as I go along, I will pause and check for comments, and I'll be happy to answer questions you have about Tennyson or In Memoriam, or if you just have other questions for me, I'll also be glad to answer those. So hopefully, we'll enjoy a pleasant morning of poetry together. All right, so we're starting off In Memoriam, AHH. If you're not familiar with In Memoriam, it begins with this title. The AHH stands for Arthur Henry Hallam, because Tennyson lost his very best friend. And after having this very close relationship, this close friendship, to lose that is incredibly painful. So um, here's Tennyson dealing with the loss of a very close friendship. And this poem is all about loss and grief. So, pretty fantastic poem. Prologue. Strong Son of God, immortal love, whom we that have not seen thy face, by faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. Thine are those orbs of light and shade. Thou madest life in man and brute. Thou madest death. And lo, thy foot is on the skull which thou hast made. Thou wilt not leave us in the dust. Thou madest man, he knows not why. He thinks he was not made to die, and thou hast made him. Thou art just. Thou seem'st human and divine, the highest, holiest manhood thou. Our wills are ours, we know not how. Our wills are ours to make them thine. Our little systems have their day, they have their day and cease to be. They are but broken lights of thee, and thou, O Lord, art more than they. We have but faith we cannot know, for knowledge is of things we see. And yet we trust it comes from thee, a beam in darkness. Let it grow. Let knowledge grow from more to more, but more of reverence in us dwell, that mind and soul according well may make one music as before, but vaster. We are fools and slight, we mock thee when we do not fear. But help thy foolish ones to bear, help thy vain worlds to bear thy light. Forgive what seemed my sin in me, what seemed my worth since I began. For merit lives from man to man, and not from man, O Lord, to thee. Forgive my grief for one removed, thy creature whom I found so fair. I trust he lives in thee, and there I find him worthier to be loved. Forgive these wild and wandering cries, confusions of a wasted youth. Forgive them where they fail in truth, and in thy wisdom make me wise. 1849. So the prologue of this poem, he's introducing his poem of suffering, and he's got a rather long poem where he explores his grief and his suffering and his pain. And as he does so, he is also talking about his conclusion. He's ultimately going to come to the conclusion that everything's going to be okay. It's all right. So as we're going through, let's follow his thread of grief. All right. 1. I held it truth with him who sings to one clear harp in divers tones, that men may rise on stepping stones of their dead selves to higher things. But who shall so forecast the years, and find in loss a gain to match, or reach a hand through time to catch the far off interest of tears? Let love clasp grief, lest both be drowned. Let darkness keep her raven gloss. Ah, sweeter to be drunk with loss, to dance with death, to beat the ground, than that the victor hours should scorn the long result of love and boast, behold the man that loved and lost, but all he was is overworn. Again, he's wrestling with love versus loss. This is where we're going to ultimately get that famous line, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." 2. Old yew, which graspest at the stones that name the underlying dead, thy fibres net the dreamless head, thy roots are wrapped about the bones. The seasons bring the flower again, and bring the firstling to the flock. And in the dusk of thee the clock beats out the little lives of men. Oh, not for thee the glow, the bloom, who changest not in any gale, nor branding summer suns avail to touch thy thousand years of gloom. And gazing on thee, sullen tree, sick for thy stubborn hardihood, I seem to fail from out my blood and grow incorporate into thee. We are actually doing Tennyson in Memoriam. Thank you, Pamela. Number 3. O sorrow, cruel fellowship, O priestess in the vaults of death, O sweet and bitter in a breath, what whispers from thy lying lip? The stars, she whispers, blindly run, a web is woven across the sky. From out waste places comes a cry, and murmurs from the dying sun. And all the phantom nature stands, with all the music in her tone, a hollow echo of my own, a hollow form with empty hands. And shall I take a thing so blind, embrace her as my natural good, or crush her like a vice of blood upon the threshold of the mind? So he's getting into really feeling the sorrow, the feeling it, the sort of crushing weight of it. Number 4. To sleep I give my powers away. My will is bondsman to the dark. I sit within a helmless bark, and with my heart I muse and say, O heart, how fares it with thee now, that thou shouldst fail from thy desire, who scarcely darest to inquire, what is it makes my beat so low? Something it is which thou hast lost, some pleasure from thine early years. Break thou deep vase of chilling tears that grief has shaken into frost. Such clouds of nameless trouble cross all night before the darkened eyes. With morning wakes the will and cries, thou shalt not be the fool of loss. I notice here at the beginning, he's talking about his will. His will is bondsman to the dark. I sit within a helmless bark. That image of sitting in a bark or a small boat is a very Dantean kind of image, and I wonder if he's pulling it from Dante. Though that feeling of being sort of lost in the dark in a boat, it makes things much more ominous and difficult for somebody who feels the weight of grief and is feeling that loss there. All right, number 5. I sometimes hold it half a sin to put in words the grief I feel, for words like nature half reveal and half conceal the soul within. But for the unquiet heart and brain, a use in measured lines language lies, the sad mechanic exercise, like dull narcotics, numbing pain. In words like weeds I'll wrap me o'er, like coarsest cloth against the cold. But that large grief which these unfold is given in outline and no more. The dealing with grief, he's trying to find a way to cope. He's writing, and yet he's not sure if his writing is actually helpful or if it's just kind of a numbing thing. But he's wrapping himself in his writing. All right, number 6. One writes that other friends remain, that loss is common to the race, and common is the commonplace, and vacant chaff, well meant for grain. That loss is common would not make my own less bitter, rather more, too common. Never morning wore to evening, but some heart did break. O Father, wheresoe'er thou be, who pledgest now thy gallant son, A shot, ere half thy draught be done, hath still the life that beat from thee. O mother, praying God will save thy sailor, while thy head is bowed. His heavy shotted hammock shroud drops in his vast and wandering grave. Ye know no more than I who wrought at that last hour to please him well, who mused on all I had to tell, and something written, something thought, expecting still his advent home, and ever met him on his way, with wishes thinking, here today, or here tomorrow he will come. Oh, somewhere meek, unconscious dove, that sittest ranging golden hair, and glad to find thyself so fair, poor child, that waitest for thy love. For now her father's chimney glows in expectation of a guest, and thinking this will please him best, she takes a riband or a rose, for he will see them on tonight. And with the thought her color burns, and having left the glass, she turns once more to set a ringlet right. And even when she turned, the curse had fallen, and her future lord was drowned in passing through the ford, or killed in falling from his horse. Oh, what to her shall be the end, and what to me remains the good? To her perpetual maidenhood, and unto me no second friend. This one reminds me a little bit of the speech in Hamlet, where Claudius tries to get Hamlet to man up by recognizing that, everybody loses their dad, everybody loses. So since it's a common thing, you just need to deal with it. And yet, just because it's common doesn't make it easier for the individual. Here, Tennyson is reflecting on the fact that, okay, so maybe everyone experiences loss, everyone experiences grief, and yet that doesn't make my grief better. And it also is a bigger shame that everyone has to feel this pain. And he reflects on a few people who might suffer and experience loss and the grief going on there. All right, number 7. Dark house, by which once more I stand here in the long, unlovely street, doors where my heart was used to beat so quickly, waiting for a hand that can be clasped no more. Behold me, for I cannot sleep, and like a guilty thing I creep at earliest morning to the door. He is not here, but far away. The noise of life begins again, and ghastly through the drizzling rain on the bald street breaks the blank day. The idea that life goes on is hard when you're suffering from loss and grief. Number 8. A happy lover who has come to look on her that loves him well, who lights and rings the gateway bell, and learns her gone and far from home. He saddens, all the magic light dies off at once from bower and hall, and all the place is dark, and all the chambers emptied of delight. So find I every pleasant spot in which we two were wont to meet, the field, the chamber, and the street, for all is dark where thou art not. Yet, as that other, wandering there in those deserted walks, may find a flower beat with rain and wind, which once she fostered up with care, so seems it in my deep regard, O my forsaken heart, with thee, and this poor flower of poesy, which little cared, for fades not yet. But since it pleased a vanished eye, I go to plant it on his tomb, that, if it can, it there may bloom, or dying, there at least may die. Again, the sentiment of grief where you, everywhere you go that you used to go with this person that you're missing now, it's an emptiness, a hollowness, that these places still are recalling memory, and yet at the same time feeling ever so much more empty. And yet then there's also the sweetness of things that are connected with and touch this person, like this flower that he's going to plant by Hallam's grave. Number 9. Fair ship that from the Italian shore sailest the placid ocean plains, with my lost Arthur's loved remains, spread thy full wings and waft him o'er. So draw him home to those that mourn in vain, a favorable speed. Ruffle thy muir mast, and lead though through prosperous floods his holy urn. All night no ruder air perplex thy sliding keel, till phosphor bright, as our pure love through early light shall glimmer on the dewy decks. Sphere all your light around, above. Sleep, gentle heavens, before the prow. Sleep, gentle winds, as he sleeps now, my friend, the brother of my love, my Arthur, whom I shall not see, till all my widowed race be run, dear as the mother to the son, more than my brothers are to me. Number 10. I hear the noise about thy kell. I hear the bell struck in the night. I see the cabin window bright. I see the sailor at the wheel. Thou bring'st the sailor to his wife, and travelled men from foreign lands, and letters unto trembling hands, and thy dark freight of vanished life. So bring him. We have idle dreams. This look of quiet flatters thus our homebred fancies. Oh, to us, the fools of habit, sweeter seems to rest beneath the clover sod that takes the sunshine and the rains, or where the kneeling hamlet drains the chalice of the grapes of God, than if with thee the roaring wells should gulf him fathom deep in brine, and hands so often clasped in mine should toss with tangle and with shells. So images of both sea burial and regular burial in his grief. Number 11. Calm as the morn, without a sound, calm as to suit a calmer grief, and only through the faded leaf the chestnut pattering to the ground. Calm and deep peace on his high wold, and on these dews that drench the firs, and all the silvery gossamers that twinkle into green and gold. Calm and still light on yon great plain that sweeps with all its autumn bowers, and crowded farms and lessening towers to mingle with the bounding main. Calm and deep peace in his wide air, these leaves that redden to the fall, and in my heart, if calm at all, if any calm, a calm despair. Calm on the seas and silver sleep, and waves that sway themselves in rest, and dead calm in that noble breast which heaves, but with the heaving deep. Number 12. Low as a dove when up she springs to bear through heaven a tale of woe, some dolorous message knit below the wild pulsations of her wings. Like her, I go. I cannot stay. I leave this mortal ark behind, a weight of nerves without a mind, and leave the cliffs and haste away. O'er ocean mirrors rounded large, and reach the glow of southern skies, and see the sails at distance rise, and linger weeping on the marge, and say, comes he thus, my friend? Is this the end of all my care? And circle moaning in the air. Is this the end? Is this the end? And forward dart again, and play about the prow, and back return to where my body sits, and learn that I have been an hour away. Number 13. Tears of the widower, when he sees a late lost form that sleep reveals, and moves his doubtful arms, and feels her place is empty, fall like these, which weep a loss forever new, a void where heart on heart reposed, and where warm hands have pressed and closed silence, till I be silent too. Which weep the comrade of my choice, an awful thought, a life removed, the human hearted man I loved, a spirit, not a breathing voice. Come time, and teach me many years. I do not suffer in a dream, for now so strange do these things seem. Mine eyes have leisure for their tears. My fancy's time to rise on wing and glance about the approaching sails, as though they brought but merchants' bales, and not the burthen that they bring. We have the continued ship imagery, which I think has to do with the carrying of Hallam's body, but also that line right there. Out come time and teach me many years. I do not suffer in a dream. The sort of dreamlike quality of being in grief. It casts an unreality on everything. There's a really fascinating book by my name's blanking for the moment. It's gone. But the what is it called? There's a really fascinating book on grief. I'll have to look it up and recall it and remind you all of it. But Joan Didion's book on grief, the loss of her daughter and her husband at the same time, makes for a really remarkable A year of magical thinking. That's it. I apologize. So a year of magical thinking is the sort of captures that image of how life in grief sort of is unreal. It's a dreamlike. I think Tennyson does that as well. All right, number 14. If one should bring me this report that thou hadst touched the land today, and I went down into the quay and found thee lying in the port, and standing muffled around with woe, should see thy passengers in rank come stepping lightly down the plank, and beckoning unto those they know. And if along with these should come the man I held as half divine, should strike a sudden hand in mine, and ask 1,000 things of home, and I should tell him all my pain, and how my life is drooped of late, and he should sorrow o'er my state, and marvel what possessed my brain, and I perceived no touch of change, no hint of death in all his frame, but found him all in all the same. I should not feel it to be strange. The feeling that the person, you should still be able to talk to the person. All right, number 15. Tonight the winds begin to rise and roar from yonder drooping day. The last red leaf is whirled away, the rooks are blown about the skies. The forest cracked, the waters curled, the cattle huddled on the lea, and wildly dashed on tower and tree, the sunbeam strikes along the world. And but for fancies which aver that all thy motions gently pass athwart a plain of molten glass, I scarce could brook the strain and stir that makes the barren branches loud. And but for fear it is not so, the wild unrest that lives in woe would dote and pour on yonder cloud that rises upward always higher, and onward drags a laboring breast, and toppled round the dreary west, a looming bastion fringed with fire. Number 16. What words are these have fallen from me? Can calm despair and wild unrest be tenants of a single breast, or sorrow such a changeling be? Or doth she only seem to take the touch of change in calm or storm, but knows no more of transient form in her deep self than some dead lake that holds the shadow of a lark hung in the shadow of a heaven? Or has the shock so harshly given confused me like the unhappy bark that strikes by night a craggy shelf, and staggers blindly ere she sink, and stunned me from my power to think, and all my knowledge of myself, and made me that delirious man whose fancy fuses old and new, and flashes into false and true, and mingles all without a plan. He captures some in the grief, the confusion, the inability to just to function. He's going through life. He says he's mingling all false and true without a plan. He calls himself delirious, which is a pretty good capturing of the feeling of uh, grief. Grief is long and complex, and it um, requires one to go through. And people talk about the series, the stages of grief, things like that. And this is a great book for exploring that. Number 17. Thou comest much wept for. Such a breeze compelled thy canvas, and my prayer was as the whisper of an air to breathe thee over lonely seas. For I in spirit saw thee move through circles of the bounding sky. Week after week the days go by. Come quick, thou bringest all I love. Henceforth, whenever thou mayst roam, my blessing, like a line of light, is on the waters day and night, and like a beacon's guard thee home. So may whatever tempest mars mid-ocean spare thee, sacred bark, and balmy drops in summer dark slide from the bosom of the stars. So kind an office hath been done, such precious relics brought by thee. The dust of him I shall not see, till all my widowed race be run. 18. 'Tis well, 'tis something. We may stand where he in England earth is laid, and from his ashes may be made the violet of his native land. 'Tis little, but it looks in truth as if the quiet bones were blessed among familiar names to rest, and in the places of his youth. Come then, pure hands, and bear the head that sleeps or wears the mask of sleep, and come, whatever loves to weep, and hear the ritual of the dead. Ah, yet, e'en yet, if this might be, I, falling on his faithful heart, would breathing through his lips impart the life that almost dies in me, that dies not, but endures with pain, and slowly forms the firmer mind, treasuring the look it cannot find, the words that are not heard again. So we finally get to the burial uh, part of the poem, but that image where he wants to breathe his own life into his dead friend, and yet I keep living. Um, it's a very sad and heartbreaking image of, of loss and grief. All right. I think I'm going to end at 20 for today because it's about all the time I have. So 19. The Danube to the Severn gave the darkened heart that beat no more. They laid him in the pleasant shore and in the hearing of the wave. There twice a day the Severn fills, the salt sea water passes by and hushes half the babbling why and makes a silence in the hills. The why is hushed nor moved along, and hushed my deepest grief of all, when filled with tears that cannot fall, I brim with sorrow drowning song. The tide flows down, the wave again is vocal in its wooded walls. My deeper anguish also falls, and I can speak a little then. 20. The lesser griefs that may be said, that breathe a thousand tender vows, are but as servants in a house where lies the master newly dead, who speak their feeling as it is, and weep the fullness from the mind. It will be hard, they say, to find another service such as this. My lighter moods are like to these, that out of words a comfort win, but there are other griefs within, and tears that in their fountain freeze. For by the hearth that children sit, cold in that atmosphere of death, and scarce endure to draw the breath, or like to noiseless phantoms flit. But open converse is there none, so much the vital spirits sink, to see the vacant chair and think, how good, how kind, and he is gone. All right. Thank you for reading with me this morning. That was In Memoriam, Alfred Lord Tennyson. We got through part 20, and we're going to continue next time, and we'll continue on with Tennyson, I think. Thank you all so much for joining me and for the comments, and I will see you again later. Bye bye.